Welcome to the University of Charleston's DEL Fellows Walker Talks, a platform for exploring leadership challenges through powerful storytelling. Today's session, titled The Factory Boss, will delve into the ethical and operational dilemmas faced by a factory owner striving to balance his commitment to his employees with the harsh realities of economic downturns and global competition. Prepare to broaden your perspective and engage deeply with the insights that emerge from this scenario. But first, let's hear from Dr. Walker on what these stories are all about.
When you actually talk to someone with these scenarios, you want to make it a dramatic enough narrative that the people that you're listening are truly engaged, empathetic, and really feel the pain, the worries, the frustration that the person that's in the scenario does. Because, of course, you want the exercise to be useful in terms of them thinking about together as a group how they would handle these situations. But more importantly, you want these stories to be ingrained on their minds so that later, if anything like this occurs, they will have been vaccinated, so that they will not prey to it. It turns out, I mean, you would think as you listen to these, well, nobody would be silly enough to fall for all of this. But these are just the kind of scenarios that end up disqualifying many people in their careers from being able to be effective leaders or moving up the ladder of leadership. So I want it to be helpful as sort of a precursor to help them, in addition to all their good sense and experience, avoid these kind of situations. Well, this is called The Factory Boss. It's a case study, and it's also, there is a movie called The Factory Boss that this is based on. And you can watch this movie if you want to. It's an International Film Festival of a few years ago, and we can find that, called The Factory Boss. Now, the initial setup is that this is not in the United States. It's somewhere in Asia. And about 25 years ago, a man from the country, now in his early 50s, good shape, then, he's exercising and all that. He's a single parent. He has a 10-year-old girl in boarding school outside of the country. Actually, it turns out in the United States. He has about 8 or 9 million in assets. He's driven to work by a driver in a black Mercedes. Remember, this is an Asian factory. Through hard work and perseverance, he now owns a factory with 800 employees. He makes toys cheaply for industrialized countries like the United States, businesses like, the big stores like Walmart and many of the others. Hard times have come upon them lately because 1,000 factories have actually gone down because now there's another country in Asia that can provide cheaper labor. And so there really weren't any new jobs coming in. He's a good man. He's respected by his colleagues, and he's in the upper middle class. And two of his colleagues talk to him and suggest that, like many of their friends, some of them have committed suicide because they lost their companies, and others have moved out of the country to another country where they can have cheaper labor. But this factory boss he really doesn't want all these people to lose their job. So he doesn't quite pay the minimum wage, but he keeps the factory open even when there's no real jobs coming in to him to keep the workers employed. So he's really using some of his own money here, but he isn't paying them the full minimum wage, but nobody's complaining. Working conditions, are unsafe and unpleasant because he doesn't have the money to buy new, safer equipment. He tries very hard to keep the workers safe through rules and oversight of covering your face and all that sort of thing, because the fumes are pretty bad. Some of the workers have worked for him for many years, multi-generations. So the factory boss goes back to the two friends and says, our factory's still working and I'm doing these things to keep people paid. And he said, I'm not going to leave the country and I'm not going to do a suicide because both of those would mean my workers would be out of a job. And my daughter wouldn't understand all this, so I'm certainly not going to consider either leaving the country or suicide. What would you do in this case where the company is clearly losing money and the conditions are unsafe for the workers? His plan is to buy time by landing a big contract and developing a new, more competitive product that is of high quality. Now, there has to be a question of what do you do? How do you get an opportunity to have this longer contract? Well, one thing you could do is to take a job where you're not making much money, but you're making a little money. Accept a contract. The company, and so he asks for 10% profit. The company that it wants to buy the toys offers no profit at all, which means he wouldn't have a chance to use any of the money for anything except paying the workers. He couldn't improve the quality of safety. What would you do? After discussion, the accepted bid with a 6-month deadline, which is really overly ambitious, and no bad publicity, he gets the 10%. The workers get a decent raise, 3%, and he can buy some new equipment. He accepts this offer of about 3%, but remember, it's going to have to be done within 6 months. That's about 6 months short of what really they could do. A young reporter intern joins the company. She's really actually an undercover newspaper reporter and discovers the harsh, unsafe conditions. And the reporter gets sick, himself or herself. A newspaper report severely damages the company's reputation. A new piece of equipment arrives that the company can't pay for because the firm doesn't have any current funds. Because of the bad publicity, he can't get a loan, and he gets a warning call from the company that if they hear any more about this, they're going to drop the contract. What should he do? In the meantime, while he's thinking this through, one of the workers gets cancer and is very ill. And although he secretly gives money to this person to help them with the cancer treatment, the others don't know. He gives it in cash. Employers find they have not been paid the minimum wage and they demand back pay, raises, and other benefits. The factory boss tells him, well, there's no money. He still arrives, of course, in the driver in with the black Mercedes. So they're convinced by outside organizers to sue. The American company cancels the contract because of the additional bad publicity. His new line of quality toys look good on paper, but he has no money to even pay the company he hired to develop the new line of dolls. He faces going to court, no company contracts, outraged demonstrating workers, and insufficient funds. His workers see him up on the second floor and they tell him to jump. What would you do at this stage if you were the faculty worker? Well, it turns out you are currently being sued by an energetic lawyer who takes the job on spec. In court, many testify against you in depth, emotionally, and with great effect. You are found guilty and must pay $100 million. You are asked to agree. This is a country where when the judge makes a decision, you are required to agree that this is a fair decision. What do you do?
Thank you for listening to our DEL Fellows Walker Talk. We look forward to exploring this topic further with you during our next discussion.